Welcome back. I hope you're still following along just fine. In this lecture, we're going to talk about an extremely common pattern in JavaScript, and that is immediately invoked functions expressions, also called IIFE. Imagine that we wanted to build a little game where we win the game if a random score from 0 to 9 is greater or equal to 5 and lose if it's smaller. So just a small and silly game really. But we want to keep the score hidden in this game, okay? So the score should not be visible. Now I'm sure that you can think of a way of doing this, right? And the answer is to write a simple function, because we already know that variables defined inside of a function cannot be accessed from the outside scope, right? Because the scoping chain only works the other way around. So we could simply write something like this. So function game without any parameters, and then calculate a random score, right? So math.random times 10, so between 0 and 9, and then simply log to the console if the score is greater or equal to 5. So just a really silly game, right? Then call it, and then let's see. Okay, so false. So this doesn't really matter here, because what I want to show you is that we can do this in a different way. Because there are a few problems with this. If the only purpose is to hide the score variable from the outside, so which means creating a private variable, then we don't need to declare a whole function with a name and then call it. We can do this in a better way, and that is to use an immediately invoked function expression, which is usually abbreviated as IIFE. So let me first write out how an IIFE looks like, and then I explain you how and why this works. So we start with parentheses, and then in here we simply write our function, and actually our anonymous function, so without a name, okay? And then let me just actually copy this. There's no need to write it again, okay? And then we just invoke this function like this, and this is it. This is an IIFE. So how does this actually work? Let's start at the beginning. So if we just wrote something like this, so function, so just something like this, so without the name, but also without the parentheses, then the JavaScript parser would think that this is a function declaration. But since we don't have any name for the function declaration, then it will throw an error. So we basically need to trick the parser and make it believe that what we have here is an expression and not a declaration. And the solution is to wrap the entire thing into parentheses, because in JavaScript, what's inside of parentheses cannot be a statement. And like this, JavaScript will know that it should treat this as an expression and not as a declaration. And then after that, we only have to invoke the function, because if we didn't do this, so if it would be like this, without the parentheses, then it would never be called and never do anything. And since we don't attach this to a variable, then nothing would ever happen. So, does that make sense? This is just how the IIFE works. And just like this, we can no longer access the score variable from the outside. So we created data privacy here. And let's confirm that actually. So let me remove this. So let's try to console log the score, but we already know that this is not going to work, right? So let's take this out here, okay. Alright, so we have true, which is the result of this IIFE, and then score is not defined, of course. So outside here in the code we cannot see the score variable. We can of course also pass arguments into the IIFE. So we could extend our function by adding a parameter called good luck to the game. And the more good luck we add to the game, then the higher the chance that we win the game. So very simple, let's just copy this. Just to show you that we can use a parameter here. So let's call this good luck. And then we subtract the good luck here. Okay, so makes sense. So the more good luck we add here, imagine we had 5, then 5 minus 5 would be 0, and then the score would always be bigger than 0, and therefore we would always win, right? And how do we now pass the argument into the function? Right, we just need to add it here. So let's use the example of 5 that I just gave you here. Okay, so let's just reload this. And now it didn't work because we have the error here. So we first need to take out this part and then true and true. And of course, the second one will always be true. So as you see, we can of course only call the IIFE once, right? Because this function is not assigned to any variable. But that's no problem at all, because in this case we are not using the function to create a piece of reusable code. All we want here is to create a new scope that is hidden from the outside scope, so where we can safely put variables. And with this we obtain data privacy and also don't interfere with other variables in our global execution context. So if this is the goal, so if this is exactly what we want, then the IIFE is the perfect solution. So again, this is not to create a piece of code that we will reuse. This is just for data privacy. Alright, so this is going to be yet another very useful tool in your JavaScript toolbox. This was, of course, just a toy example, but later in our project, we will see how important this IIFE pattern is in real-life applications in order to structure our code and obtain data privacy and code modularity. So let's now move on.